Alright guys, I am back with another deck profile for Cardfight Vanguard Dear Days 2 on Nintendo Switch. This time I got version 1 of my vintage format Royal Paladin Alfred deck. So version 1 is only including cards from the base game. It does not include any of the DLC cards from the two vintage DLC expansions that they've released so far. Mainly because I haven't bought either one of those yet. Not that there's that many Royal Paladin cards in either one of those DLCs anyway. But yeah, this is only using cards from the base game, which is everything up through Booster Set 5. So this is my first vintage format deck profile, so if you're not familiar with vintage formats, little quick summary on it. Vintage format uses the old original series cards from back when Cardfight Vanguard first started, back in 2011, I believe it was, in Japan anyway. So this does not include any of the newer cards from the two reboots, the V-Series or D-Series reboots that we've had over the years. This is just the original series old school cards. So there are quite a few rule changes for this format compared to standard format D-Series. Mainly there is no ride deck, there is no energy, there is no front triggers or over triggers. Instead we have a thing called a stand trigger. There are no order cards. It's a lot more streamlined than what you're used to if you only played D-Series Standard. There's no G-Deck, there's no striding, there's none of that. G-Assist is a thing in this game though, however, even though there is no G-Deck, so if you don't have the next grade to ride into, you still can G-Assist, and you just have to remove 2 cards from your hand. You don't have to remove the 2 from your G-Deck since there is no G-Deck. Clan fight rules is also not a thing in this game, mainly because there isn't enough cards from some clans to actually be able to build a full deck of them, like with Nubatama. So you can mix clans in this game. However, most of my decks, I don't do that. I usually stick with one clan. This deck in particular does have exclusively Royal Paladin cards in it, but it is an option if you want to go for that. However, the rule is in effect where if you check into a trigger, you do have to have a unit on your board with the same clan as that trigger unit in order to actually get the trigger effect. So that's something to keep in mind as well. But anyway, this deck, like I said, is a pure Royal Paladin deck, so it uses a lot of the cards used by Aichi Sendo, the original protagonist of the original anime. So you got your blaster blades and all of that, while also focusing on King of Knights Alfred, mainly. Which, the whole premise of this deck and Royal Paladin in general back then was basically just filling your board up as easily as possible, calling units from your deck, and strengthening your units based on how full your board is. So a pretty simple deck. Most of the decks from back then were pretty simple compared to how they are today, but a pretty fun deck overall. So as always, we'll be going through the deck and then I'll show it off in one card fight. So with my standard format decks, I usually start with the ride deck and then the main deck, going from grade 3 down to grade 0. I think with my vintage format decks, I'm going to actually start with the grade 0s and work my way up. So like I said, there is no ride deck, but we do have our first Vanguard, our starter, which is part of the main deck technically. But our starter is Barkgall. So he has 2 abilities. First one is an auto ability that says when another Royal Paladin rides this unit, you may call this card to rearguard circle. So this is an ability that a lot of starters had back in the original series. Again, different from standard formats where all the starters basically have the same skill. Starters were much more unique back then. But a lot of them did have this ability, which was later referred to as the Forerunner ability. But this card was printed before the Forerunner keyword became a thing. But yeah, when you ride over it, you can just call it straight out of your soul to rearguard circle. So then he also has his activate ability, which abilities were written a little bit different format back then too, where the cost was written at the start of the skill. So the cost for the activate ability is just to rest this unit, and it lets you search your deck for up to 1 card named Future Knight Lu or Flogel, call it to rearguard circle, and shuffle your deck. So this is a pretty simple ability. You just rest it to call either Lu or Flogel directly from the deck, which both those cards are actually trigger units. which that sounds like a bad thing to do, calling out triggers from your deck to rearguard. Generally, you don't want to do that since you want to keep those around to check into. However, Future Knight Lu, which we'll be going over here in a second, he has a very important ability in this deck that requires all three of these cards. So basically this card just sets up the pieces that you need in order to use Lu's skill consistently. So a pretty simple skill, but a very good starter. So next up for the grade zeros, the only other grade zeros in the deck are our trigger lineup. So we have 6 crit, 2 stands, 4 draws, and 4 heals. So starting first with the crit triggers, we do have 3 copies of Future Knight Lu. So triggers back then, you know, in the original series did only give 5,000 power instead of 10,000 power. So again, that is a difference from the D-series standard formats. But anyway, Lu does have one activate ability, which the cost of it is to counterblast 1 and choose a unit named Future Knight Lu, a unit named Barkgall, and a unit named Flowgall from your rearguard circle and put them into your soul. And the ability is if you have a grade 1 Vanguard, you can search your deck for up to 1 card named Blaster Blade, write it, and shuffle your deck. So this is an extremely important skill in this deck. You do want to get this off every game. Since there is no ride deck in Vintage formats, you do have to ride directly from your hand every turn in order to make it up to grade 3, which means there is a chance of misriding if you do not have the next grade in your hand ready to go, something that is not a problem in standard formats. However, this card does make it a lot more consistent, since on turn 1 you can just ride any grade 1 from your hand, and then on turn 2, when you would normally ride into a grade 2 from your hand, even if you don't have a grade 2 in your hand, you can just choose not to ride during that ride phase, and instead use this card's ability in order to suck itself, Barkgall, and Flowgall into your soul, and just superior ride Blaster Blade directly from your deck. So this can guarantee your grade 2 ride, while also helping fill up your soul. So this is a pretty good ability. It doesn't let you get to grade 3 any faster than you normally would, but it does help with that consistency. And it does technically save you a card from your hand, since you no longer have to ride from your hand for that one turn. And since both the copy of Lu and the copy of Flowgall should be pulled directly from your deck by Barkgall's ability on turns 1 and 2, then you're gaining those cards and then just shoving them into soul in order to get your ride off. So basically the entire combo is just a +1, since it saves you that 1 card from your hand having to ride. Now, it does cost you 2 triggers out of your deck, so it does make you slightly less likely to check into a trigger throughout the game, but it's not really a huge deal. So yeah, very vital card for this deck. I'm only running it at 3 since you can search it out off of Barkgall's skill, so you shouldn't really have any trouble finding it. If you want to bump it up to 4, you can. It's not really a huge deal, but yeah, 3 is fine. So, additionally for the other crit trigger, we do have 3 copies of Bringer of Good Luck Epona, which is just a vanilla crit. Again, if you want to drop this to 2 and run 4 Lu, you can, but again, it's not going to make that much difference. Next up for the stand triggers, we have 2 copies of Flowgall, which again is just a vanilla stand. I actually wouldn't be running stands in this deck at all. I would go with all crits if you didn't have to have Flowgall for Lu's skill. This is a vital piece. Again, you can't search it off of Barkgall's skill, so you shouldn't have any trouble finding it. I'm running 2 of it in the off chance that you damage check 1 on your first turn. But yeah, it's mainly there just for that Lu combo. If you use that, then one of these will be immediately pulled out of your deck. If you haven't seen the other one already and the other one's still floating around in your deck, you do want to keep that in mind for your attack order, since, again, if you're not familiar with stand triggers, when you check into a stand trigger, it, again, gives one of your units 5k and lets you stand one of your rear guards. So when you're doing your attack order later in the game, you do want to always attack with one of your rear guard columns first before attacking with your Vanguard, in case you do happen to hit the other copy of Flowgall still in your deck. You will have a stand target and be able to get an extra attack out of that. So yeah, do keep that in mind, but it's mostly here just for that Lu combo. So next for the draws, we have 4 copies of Weapons Dealer Governin. So just your vanilla draw trigger. And then lastly for the heals, we also have 4 copies of Yggdrasil Maiden Elaine. So again, just a vanilla heal. So that is all the grade 0s. Moving on to the grade 1s. First off, we have 4 copies of Little Sage Marin, who is actually just a vanilla 8k grade 1, which back in the day, being 8k for a grade 1 was actually a big deal, since power values were a lot less standardized back then than they are in D-Series. So most of your grade 1s were 6 or 7k. So being an 8k and being able to hit some better numbers was actually pretty important. So he has no skill, but he is just a more powerful unit that can make for a very nice booster. Next up, we have 4 copies of Lake Maiden Lien. So she has an activate ability when she's on Vanguard or Rearguard Circle, where the cost is you rest this unit and choose a card from your hand and discard it, and it just lets you draw a card. So this is just a hand filter. You drop one to draw one just by resting this card. So not anything real crazy, but this deck does run a slightly higher than average grade 3 count, which obviously grade 3s have no shield, so if your hand is getting clogged with grade 3s, this can be a good option to get rid of one of those and just draw into hopefully something better. You can get away with a little bit different of a grade ratio in this deck since you're getting your superior call, or excuse me, your superior ride of your grade 2 anyway. So you can get away with it. Another good thing about this card is our main grade 3 boss units actually can't be boosted. So if you put this on your back row center rearguard circle, since you can't boost with her anyway, you can just go ahead and rest her to get that hand filter, and you won't totally be wasting that slot on your board. Also, since her skill works on both Vanguard and rearguard circle, if you go first and you ride this card, you can go ahead and use it on turn 1 if you want as well, since you won't be attacking that turn anyway. You can just rest your Vanguard to again go ahead and get that hand filter. So nothing real crazy, but a pretty versatile card in this deck. Next up, we got 2 copies of Wingal. So he has an auto ability when he's on rearguard circle that says when this unit boosts a card named Blaster Blade, the boosted unit gets power plus 4,000 until end of that battle. So as you can see, Wingal is a 6k base, so if you get him behind Blaster Blade, he will be a 10k booster for him, which Blaster Blade's 9k, so that'll make a column of 19, which isn't the best number in the world, but it will force at least 10k out of even cross-ride units that have a 13k base. So again, not anything super amazing, but a decent enough card. If you want to replace this with anything else, you really can. I'm mostly just running it for nostalgia reasons. Wingal is one of those classic units. And also, since we have kind of a limited card pool, there aren't really a lot of other great options for our grade 1 lineup right now. So I am just running it as the 2 of to stick it behind Blaster Blade. Behind anything else, it is just a vanilla 6k, which isn't super great. But yeah, if you want to replace this with something else, you can feel free to do so. So then lastly for the grade 1s, we just have our Sentinels. So we have 4 copies of Flash Shield Assault. So again, this is the Perfect Guard, a little bit different than the D-Series Perfect Guards. Again, it does have the Sentinel ability, that works the same. But then it also has its auto ability, where the cost is choose a Royal Paladin from your hand and discard it. And the ability is when this unit is placed on Guardian Circle, you may pay the cost, and if you do, you choose one of your Royal Paladin that is being attacked, and that unit cannot be hit until end of that battle. So again, it does block any attack, just like you would expect to have a Perfect Guard. However, it is clan locked, so again, that kind of discourages you from mixing clans, since you have to discard a Royal Paladin, and it can only protect a Royal Paladin. So every card in this deck is Royal Paladin, so it's not a problem. But the other big difference from the D-Series Perfect Guards is there's no option to make this free. The D-Series ones, if you have 1 or less cards in your hand, you don't have to discard. This one does not have that ability, so you have to discard in order to play this, regardless how many cards are in your hand. So that means if this is the last card left in your hand, it is actually totally useless, since you won't be able to pay the cost to use it. And of course, it inherently has 0 shield. So a minor difference, but it is something to keep in mind if you're, used to the standard format D series Perfect Arts. So that is all the grade 1s. Moving on to the grade 2s. First off, we have 4 copies of Blaster Blade. So he has 2 auto abilities. First one has a cost of Counterblast 2. And it says when this unit is placed on Vanguard Circle, you may pay the cost. If you do, you choose an opponent's rearguard and retire it. So then it also has a second auto ability, which again has a cost of Counterblast 2. It says when this unit is placed on a rearguard circle, if you have a Royal Paladin Vanguard, you may pay the cost, and if you do, you choose an opponent's grade 2 or greater rearguard and retire it. So both these skills are obviously very similar, letting you pick off one of your opponent's rearguards. If you ride it onto Vanguard Circle, then you can choose any rearguard to pick off. If you call it a rearguard, it has to be a grade 2 or greater rearguard that you get rid of. So a little bit more restrictive on rearguard circle than it is on Vanguard Circle. Now you will be guaranteed to ride into this card every game, thanks to Lou's ability. However, most of the time you actually won't get to use his on-ride skill unless your opponent's just rushed you really hard and you're already at 3 damage at that point, which is not a great position to be in to begin with. But you will need 3 damage in total in order to use his on-ride skill, since Lou's ability also costs a Counterblast, so you have to use 1 Counterblast for him, and then another 2 for Blaster Blade's on-ride. So most of the time you actually won't get that one off. You can get the on-call skill off a lot more easily, since, you can just use it whenever you call him to rearguard later in the game. As you'll notice, the costs for cards back then were more steeper than they are today too, costing 2 Counterblast to just be a -1 to your opponent. So you kind of got to pick and choose how you want to use your Counterblasts each game in this deck. So, this isn't something you can spam, basically. Use it when you feel like you're getting the value out of it, but it's not something that you're going to be using all of the time, regardless of if you're putting him on Vanguard or Rearguard Circle. Sometimes you just call him just to have a unit on board, and you actually don't use the skill at all. So a situationally useful skill if you do have the resources to take advantage of it, but again, he is mostly there for Lou's skill in order to guarantee that superior ride into grade 2, and of course just being an iconic unit for the deck. So next up, we got 3 copies of Knight of Silence Galatine. So again, this is your vanilla 10k grade 2, similar to Marin. He has no skills, but he has a higher base power, so he's just helpful in hitting those better numbers for your columns. So then our last grade 2 is 2 copies of Knight of Truth Gordon. So he has an auto ability that says when this unit intercepts, if you have a Royal Paladin Vanguard, this unit gets shield plus 5,000 until end of that battle. So it's just a 10k intercept. If you guard with him from hand, he is just 5k like normal. So you do have to actually get him out on your board before you can really take advantage of that ability. But it is nice to have that extra defensive boost. If you'll notice, the shield values are a little bit lower back in Vintage format as well. All of your triggers are just 10k shields, except for the draws. As opposed to the 15 that you would be used to in D series, which your columns are going to be hitting lower numbers too, so it kind of balances out. But yeah, having that extra 10k shield option in the deck can be very handy. He is just an 8k base, so he's a little bit weaker on offense, but if you can get him in front of Marin, that'll still make a roll of 16k, which would be magic numbers against 11k Vanguards, which are pretty common. Most Vanguards are going to be 10 or 11k, with cross rides of course being the exception at 13k if you can get their prior form in the soul. So a little bit harder to hit magic numbers with, but definitely a nice defensive option for the deck. So that's actually all the grade 2s, so moving on to the grade 3s. First off, we have 4 copies of our main ride target, the main boss unit in this deck, King of Knights Alfred. So he has a continuous ability when he's on Vanguard Circle that says your units cannot boost this unit. So he cannot be boosted at all. Like I already mentioned, you can put Lien behind him in that back row center circle and use her ability to rest her, since she can't be used to boost anyway, in order to still take advantage of that. But yeah, he's not going to be able to be boosted by anything. However, he does have his second continuous ability that's also active on Vanguard Circle. That says, during your turn, this unit gets power plus 2,000 for each of your Royal Paladin rearguards. So this makes up for the fact that he can't be boosted. He gains power for each one of your rearguards you have out. So if you can fill up your entire board, he will be gaining an extra 10k from this skill, making him swing for 20k. Now that is his ceiling, unfortunately, since he can't be boosted. So if you're going against an 11 or 13k Vanguard, he will come up short of being able to hit those magic numbers. If you're going against another 10k Vanguard, like Alfred himself, he will be hitting 20k, which will be a magic number to force more shield out of your opponent. But yeah, there isn't really much you can do about that regardless, since the only way to power him up is his own ability, and that caps him at 20k. But then he also has his Activate skill that is active on both Vanguard and Rearguard Circle. That has a cost of Counterblast 3, but it lets you search your deck for up to one Grade 2 or less Royal Paladin, call it to Rearguard Circle, and shuffle your deck. So this ability does have a very steep cost with 3 Counterblast, meaning you'll probably only get to use this once per game, unless you get really lucky with some heal triggers. But it lets you search your entire deck for any Grade 2 or lower Royal Paladin to get out onto your board. So a very powerful skill letting you grab anything you want from your deck, basically, except for Palamedes, which is one of the Grade 3 rearguards we'll go over here in a second. But being able to grab almost anything you need from your deck is very, very helpful. If you have 5 face-up damage, you could use this and call out Blaster Blade and then immediately use his skill to retire one of your opponent's rearguards. If you need an extra defensive boost, you can use this to call out Gordon to get that 10k Interceptor into play. If you need a good booster in your back row, you can call out Marin. If you haven't found Li Yin yet and you want Li Yin behind him in order to use her skill to hand filter, you can search that out. It can basically grab anything you need to help fill in that board, which will also in turn trigger his second ability to give him even more power, since that's another unit on your field as well. So a kind of steep cost, but a very powerful ability, and all around just a very cool Vanguard for the deck. So next up, we also have one copy of the other form of Alfred, Alfred Early. So he has an auto ability that says when this unit is placed on Vanguard Circle, you choose up to one card named Blaster Blade from your soul and call it to Rearguard Circle. So again, a very simple ability. You just ride into him and superior call Blaster Blade from your soul. So that's basically a Soul Blast 1 for a +1, which back in the day was very, very good. So again, it helps you fill in your board. It can trigger Blaster Blade's on call ability again. This card does not have the cannot be boosted stipulation like King of Knights Alfred. So if you do have something in your back row center, you will be able to boost him. Now, he doesn't gain any power on his own, so we'll be relying on that booster a little bit more. But it can be a nice backup ride. Obviously, if you have King of Knights Alfred, you usually want to go into it instead of this. But if you have this, it can be a nice option as well. You can occasionally ride this over top of King of Knights, actually. If your opponent like decimated your board or something and you can't boost Alfred up very much, you can ride into this, get a card onto your board by calling Blaster Blade from Soul, which Blaster Blade should always be there thanks to the superior ride from Lou's skill, so you should be guaranteed to have him set up and ready to go. But yeah, you can call him out from Soul. If you get a booster behind your Vanguard, it should be swinging for at least 16k, which if your opponent's at 11k, that'll be the same amount of block as 20k, so it doesn't make that much difference unless your opponent is only at a 10k Vanguard. So yeah, a bit more situational, but a good option for the deck, and again, I am just kind of running this for the thematic reasons, since I did want to get Alfred's earlier form into the deck. So next up, we also have 2 copies of Solitary Knight Gancelot. So he has 2 activate abilities. First of which is active on Vanguard Circle with a cost of Counterblast 2. It says if you have a card named Blaster Blade in your soul, this unit gets power plus 5,000, critical plus 1 until end of turn. So again, this ability should always be able to go off, since you should be guaranteed to have the Blaster Blade in your soul, assuming you didn't previously ride into Alfred early and call him out. You should have that since you get your superior ride from Lou's skill, and it just gives him an extra 5k and an extra crit for the turn for the cost of Counterblast 2. which, as you can see, Gancelot is only a 9k grade 3, which is pretty low for grade 3s, even back in vintage times. So a lower base power, a little bit harder to defend against if you ride into this, but one usage of this skill will get him to 14k 2 crit. So if you can get a booster behind him, that's at least 7k, so like if you get Lian behind him, he will hit 21,002 crit. So that is a magic number for 11k Vanguards. So he can hit some pretty decent numbers and pressure your opponent pretty well. This ability can be used more than once per turn as well. There is no once per turn restriction on it. So if you have the 4 face-up damage, you can use this twice and stack this ability, giving him an extra 10k and an extra 2 crit, bringing him up to potentially 19,003 crits, plus boost, plus twin drive. So it can hit some big numbers if you want to go that route. Again, this is a backup ride option. Again, you want to try to go into one of the Alfred forms ahead of this, but it can be an option. Late game, if you have the 2 damage and you want to ride into this as sort of a finisher and use that, you can have that option as well. But yeah, it's mainly there to be your backup ride target, since, again, we're not guaranteed to be able to ride into our main boss units like you are in standard format. So anyway, he also has his other activate ability that's active in your hand, actually. That has the cost of revealing this card to your opponent and putting it on top of your deck. And it lets you search your deck for up to 1 card named Blaster Blade, reveal it to your opponent, put it into your hand, and shuffle your deck. So again, a simple ability letting you just swap this card out in your hand with a copy of Blaster Blade in your deck. So that's mainly there. In some decks that can be used to get your grade 2 ride if you don't have it, but we have the guaranteed grade 2 ride from the Barkall and Lu combo. So this can mainly just be there if you want some more shield in your hand. Swapping a grade 3 card with no shield for a grade 2 card with some shield is generally a better thing to do. So that can be useful if your hand's full of grade 3s and you just want some more defensive cards. Other than that, this can just be good fodder to discard for Lian's skill. But yeah, all around, I do like this card for this deck. If you want to, you can replace 1 or 2 copies of this with Soul Saver Dragon to use as an alternate finisher as well. The only reason I'm not running Soul Saver Dragon in this deck is because I'm going to be doing a different build that's completely dedicated to Soul Saver Dragon, and I just wanted to kind of mix up my decks as much as possible. But yeah, if you want to replace one or both of these copies with Soul Saver Dragon, you can go that route as well. So then lastly, for the grade 3s, we just have 3 copies of Swordsman of the Explosive Flames, Palamedes. So he has an auto ability when he's on Vanguard or Rearguard Circle that says when this unit attacks, if the number of grade 3 Royal Paladin, Vanguards, and or Rearguards you have is 2 or more, this unit gets power plus 3,000 until the end of that battle. So again, a very simple ability, but a very powerful one for back in the day. He has a 10k base, and this ability gives him an extra 3,000 power, so it makes him a 13k attacker, which the only condition to be able to do that is having 2 or more grade 3 units out on your board. So if you ride into anything and then call this card to Rearguard Circle, you'll automatically have that condition met. So he's a very easy to achieve 13k attacker on Rearguard. If you can get him in front of Marin, then that'll make a roll of 21, which again is a magic number for 11k Vanguards. So just an all-around excellent attacker for this deck, an excellent stand target as well. If you do have that one stand trigger still floating around in your deck, you can give the power to him and re-stand him, and he'll be attacking for 18k. So an excellent rearguard, not really a good ride target. This ability does work when he's on Vanguard Circle, but if you're riding into this, that means you didn't have any other grade 3 to ride into. So that probably means you don't have another grade 3 rearguard to call to actually get this ability turned on, unless you just got 2 copies of this card in your hand as your only grade 3s, in which case you could ride one and call one. But other than that, most of the time you're actually not going to be able to get this ability off if he's just on your Vanguard Circle, because you probably don't have another grade 3 rearguard to meet that condition. And even if you do, of course, your opponent can attack into that grade 3 rearguard or retire it with their skills or whatever. So it's harder to keep online in that situation too. So this is the last grade 3 you would want to ride out of all your options in this deck. But calling it to rearguard does make for a very excellent attacker. So all around, still a very important offensive card for the deck. So that is the deck, so we will go ahead and have our one fight with it. And let's see, I think we'll fight Kanji. He uses dark irregulars in vintage format. Which we won, so we are going first. Again, difference from standard format. If you win the rock, paper, scissors, you automatically go first instead of getting to choose. But anyway, let's see, we'll put back one of those perfect guards, Lou, and I guess Palamedes as well. Since I want Alfred in my opening hand if we can get him, which we did. We got 2 of them actually. So we can go ahead and ride Lien, which will trigger Barkgall's ability to let us call him from the soul, so we'll just put him back here. So then we want to go ahead and use Barkgall's activate ability to rest him. And we're going to call out the one Flogall left in the deck, since the other one's in our hand. And since we're going first and we can't attack anyway, we'll go ahead and use Lien's ability as well to rest her, and we'll discard one of these Alfreds to draw. And with that, we can just go ahead and end our turn. And as starter skill, we'll let it soul charge.
Vanguard.
And this is the only attack he's getting this turn, and we need 1 damage for Lou's skill next turn, so we are going to let that through. Alright, so now we actually want to end the phase without riding, because instead we want to use Barkgall's activate skill once again to rest him, and superior call Lou from our deck. So then with that, we want to go ahead and use Lou's activate ability to counterblast one, and shove him, Barkgall, and Flogall into the soul. To superior ride Blaster Blade from the deck. And again, we cannot use his ability since we don't have any more face-up damage. But we can go ahead and call Galatine over here. And with that, we can go ahead and attack with the Vanguard first, since we don't have any more stand triggers left in the deck. And he gets a draw trigger, which means Galatine actually won't be able to hit anything. So I had to just go ahead and end our turn. And I'll let that through. And we get a heal trigger, which we do get. So we will heal 1. And give that power to the Vanguard. And this last rearguard won't be able to hit us unless it gets a trigger anyway, so I'm going to go ahead and let this one through too. And he got no trigger. But we get another heal trigger, which we also get. So we heal again. And I'll give that to Galatine since it doesn't really matter either way. Alright, so now we're going to ride King of Knights Alfred. So let's see, most of our hand is triggers at the moment, which isn't great. But we will go ahead and call Palamedes over here. And that's pretty much all we can do at the moment. We can't use Alfred's skill since we only have the 1 damage, and I want to keep those triggers to guard with. So I guess we'll just be going with this. So we will attack with Alfred first. He gains 4k from his own skill.
Damage check.
So now we'll attack with Galatine. And he intercepts. And then we can attack with Palamedes. And his skill will give him an extra 3k, which actually won't make a difference. And he intercepts again. And he rode into Steel Vampire. Which lets him soul charge and gain 2k. And Alluring Succubus will let him soul charge again.
Vanguard
And I'll let that through.
Drive check. Drive check. Stand trigger. Power.
And he gets a stand trigger, but he just had to stand his Vanguard booster since nothing else in his front row was rested yet. So, other than the power, that actually won't help him any. And the power won't make a huge difference either, because I'm going to go ahead and let that one through as well, even though Blue Dust skill will let him soul charge again. And he does get the soul charge since Blue Dust's attack hit. But that's okay. So we're going to, again, end the phase without riding, since we're already on the boss we want to be on. So we're going to call Late in to our back row center. And I'm going to go ahead and use her ability as well. So we'll rest her, and we will discard... we'll drop Governin to draw. So then we'll use Alfred's ability as well to Counter Blast 3. And we can call it any grade 2 or lower from our deck. So I'm going to go ahead and just grab Marin to help fill in this back row. And we'll put Marin behind Palamedes, which gives Alfred another 2k as well. So again, we come up short of filling up our entire board, unfortunately. But we're a little bit better than last time. So we'll go ahead and attack with Alfred first. And there's another Marin that I could have used a little sooner. And a Perfect Guard as well.
Damage check.
And he gets a draw trigger. So Galatine can't hit his Vanguard anymore, so we might as well go ahead and pick off Blue Dust. So then we can attack with Palamedes, boosted by Marin. And his extra 3k will make a difference this time, since it'll push him past a magic number to 21,000. And he guards. And Steel Vampire will once again let him soul charge and gain 2k. And then he uses the Edel Rose in his hand to swap it out for Werewolf Seeker when she calls.
Vanguard.
So we'll guard that one with Epona. And his last rearguard can't hit anything without a trigger, so we'll let this one through. He gets a crit trigger, which is going to put us to 5. But we get a draw trigger, so we'll give that to our Vanguard. And we get a crit trigger, so I'm going to give that to Palamedes, which will force him to attack into Galatine, and we got another Galatine in our hand anyway. So we'll let that one through. Which again lets him soul charge. Alright, so again we do not want to ride. And instead we're actually going to call Gordon to the front row. And we'll call Marin behind him. So we finally have our full board, bringing Alfred up to his maximum 20k. So I'm going to use Lien's skill again, and we will rest her and discard one of these blaster blades to draw. And then we'll go ahead and attack with Alfred first for 20,000 plus Twin Drive. And he gets another draw trigger. So then we'll attack with Gordon. And he intercepts. So then we're going to attack with Palamedes. So once again, we'll gain 3k. Again, pushing him past a magic number. And he guards. And he managed to fill up his board as well. Alright, so we'll intercept that one with Gordon, which will trigger his ability to gain 5,000 shield. And I'm gonna just go ahead and perfect guard that one with Assault. So we'll discard. And we'll drop one of these Marins.
スキル発動完全ガード
ドライブチェックスタンドトリガー
It gets a stand trigger,
プラス
so we'll get an extra attack this turn.
クリティカルトリガ
And a crit trigger on top of that.
ープラスパワープラス ヴァンガードにアタック
Alright, so we'll guard that with Galatine.
ガード
ヴァンガードにアタック
And that is a whopping 27,002 crit. So we'll guard with Lou and Flogel.
ガード
ターンイン
スタンドドロー
Alright, so again with in the ride phase without riding. So we'll use Lien's ability once again to rest and discard Alfred.
発動
And I'm actually going to go ahead and call Blaster Blade. And we'll use his on-call ability to counter blast 2.
スキル発動
And we'll take out one of these Werewolf Seekers. So I get rid of one of his intercepts. And then we can attack with Alfred first
ヴァンガードにアタック
for the magic 20 key.
ガー
But he guards for 2 to pass.
ドライブチェック
And we got none. So we'll attack with Blaster Blade, boosted by Marin.
アタック
ガー
And we'll attack with Palamedes,
ヴァンガードにアタック スキル発動
who once again gains 3k.
パワープラス
ノーガー
Finally let that one
ド
through, which is going to put him to 5. Which means he can use his Mega Blast next turn.
スタンドドロースキル発動
First we'll Soul Charge again and gain 2k.
スキル発動
And yep, he's using Steel Vampire's Mega Blast. So he's going to get a Soul Blast 8 and Counter Blast 5. And force me to ride one of my rear guards. So he rode Lien. So that means I can't call any grade 2's Guardian Circle, and I'm guarding from 7k, so that's not great. Let's see, that's 13, so we're gonna have to guard that with Epona.
ガード
ヴァンガードにアタック
And we'll perfect guard this one. And discard Gancelot.
スキル発動完全ガード
ドライブチェックドライブチェックヴァンガードにアタック
Alright, so we're going to guard this one with that draw, Marin, and our intercept. So we survived, but just barely. And now Steel Vampire will let me ride anything from our soul, so we're gonna ride back into Alfred. Alright. So we do not have much left to work with here, so I'm gonna just plop Blaster Blade down. And we do not have anything good to fill in that back row center, so I'm just gonna attack. We're both about to deck out, by the way, so we'll attack with Alfred. Any perfect guards. And we get a heal trigger, which we do get. So that is very helpful, so we're gonna heal 1. And we're gonna give that power to Blaster Blade. And we get another heal trigger, which we do not get, but we'll give the power to Palamedes. So we'll attack with Blaster Blade, boosted by Merit. Any perfect guards again. He's got 2 cards in his hand and 1 intercept, and potentially 2 sentinels left. So we'll attack with Palamedes, boosted by Marin. Palamedes' skill will put him to 26,000. Will it be enough? Oh, he had another perfect guard. Come on. Oh, and he discarded his last perfect guard for it. Wow. Well, he's out of sentinels. But he survived. Question is, will we survive? We're only at 4, so we can't take one of these. And that's just 13,000, so we're going to block that with Governing. And let's see, he's got 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. He's only got 3 triggers left, but he's only got 9 cards in his deck. We'll hope there's not a crit in there, and we will let this one through. And he gets a draw trigger. But that's fine, because we'll survive. So we'll guard with Elaine, and we'll intercept with Blaster Blade. Alright, so he's got 4 cards left in his hand. And I don't think I can survive another turn anyway, so you know what? We're going to go all in and go final turn. So we are not going to ride. And instead we're going to call Lien and Galatine. So we got Alfred back up to his full 20k. So we're gonna, let's see, how many triggers we got left? We got 1 crit. And that's all. Alright then. So let's go ahead and attack with Alfred first.
ヴァンガードにアタック
And he dropped most of his hand and an intercept for 2 to pass. So that's definitely not going through. Because we don't even have 2 triggers left in the deck. But he's got 1 card left and we got 2 attacks. So we're going to attack with Palamedes.
ヴァンガードにアタックスキル発動
Who again gains thinking.
パワープラス
ノーガー
And he's got to let it through.
ドダメージチェック
And that stand does not help him, so we finally got him with that one.
私の勝ちね
After a whopping 15 turns. So there you go, that was version 1 of my Royal Paladin Alfred deck. It is a lot of fun being able to play these old vintage format cards again. It's been a really long time since I got to play with any of these old cards. So it's a nostalgia trip for me being able to play this format. But this deck is very fun to play, very simple, but very fun. So anyway, I'll be back soon with more deck profiles. Next up, I think I'm going to do another vintage format deck, actually, with my Kagero Overlord deck. So until then, I guess that's all for this video. So lots of luck to you and yours.